Welcome to Nacht Waffen Pilot with Penny Bradley, and today my guest is Matt Tracey, who served both with Nacht Waffen and with the Draco Corps of humans that work in their military. I've interviewed other people who have also served in that military, notably the Hendricks. And Matt has memories of being an engineer in Nacht Waffen, and so we have a lot of territory to possibly cover in just under 2 hours. So welcome, Matt.
Hey, how you doing? All
So
right. So,
where did you want to get started?
well, I had a presentation. Well, no, I didn't have a presentation. I was working on a presentation and having trouble doing that. I don't organize well or easily. Didn't give myself enough time. So I guess I'm just going to wing it here. I was going to talk about the space drives, the ones
Okay.
that I'm aware of, what I remember of their functioning, and what I'm doing right now to try and rebuild the rest of that knowledge and memory. Um, let's see here. I guess I'll start with the latest memory. Work my way backwards.
Okay.
It's the latest that I remember. Field generators that the Germans are using, that Nacht Waffen uses, and I was actually bouncing back and forth with a mutual friend of ours. Um, some of this. It was actually a power source. I was bouncing back and forth with him.
Is this a
Trying to,
person who's public?
yeah, but his name isn't public. That's why I'm not
Okay.
giving. You know who I'm talking about.
Okay.
He's in the private chat that I made.
Um, on my channel, we refer to him as Herr Mayor.
Yeah, him.
Him.
So I was bouncing back and forth with him about a power source I was remembering involving crystals, and we finally broke it down as far as the power source goes. It was a battery that was used in smaller objects, like the exoskeleton, like the big exoskeletons,
Hmm.
fighter craft, shuttlecraft. Those types of smaller objects were using these crystal fusion batteries, and
Yeah, I
it was
remember those.
how to figure out how would a crystal fusion battery work. And then I broke it down. Literally all it is a a lab grown pure quartz. I mean, yeah, pure silicone quartz. That's what it is. Just like you would make semiconductors with here. They
Okay.
take quartz, they make slices out of the whole thing, and then they dope the slices in fusible material. Um, Boron and deuterium would be the one of the most readily available materials. There were others. I think there were others that were used also. Um, Tritium can also be used in place of deuterium. It's another isotope of hydrogen, um, but it's slightly radioactive. There's much less of it available. So deuterium is probably going to be the most readily available thing you're going to use. Anyway, so you dope it with boron, then you dope it with deuterium. Now you have a crystal that's got two fusible materials under pressure. Once in the doping process, you're heating up the crystal so that it expands and allows atoms to transfer in and out of itself. Um, you put it in a chamber under high extreme pressure. Basically, first you heat it up to its maximum point just before it loses solidity, before the melting point of
Okay.
silicon. Then, um, basically, the chamber's under extremely high pressure of whatever material in gaseous form you want to embed in the crystal. So the heat expands the crystal and allows that boron atmosphere inside the chamber under extreme pressure to embed itself into the crystal. And what's happening is it's relinquishing a silicon atom for a boron atom. And so at every point in the geometric structure of the crystal where the boron is allowed to go, it's replacing a silicon atom. Then, let it cool down, remove the boron gas that's left and silicon atoms that have now exited the crystal to replace it. And then you do the same thing with the deuterium. Now you have a workable crystal that you can use as a fusion source. Um, what I remember is them being in thin sheets. The thicker the sheet, the longer it lasted, but the lower the power you draw from it. Thinner the sheets, the less time you had for it, but the more power you drew from it because the more sheets you could have in a single block unit. So, you get what I'm saying?
I'm getting that thinner layers stacked were better than a larger solid.
Depends.
But
Um,
but the question is why?
well, the thinner the layer, the more layers you can have.
Yeah.
And between each layer is where the power is being drawn from. So the more surface area you had to draw from, the more power you had to work with. So
Okay.
the fewer surface areas you had to draw from, the thicker you could make the crystal. The longer that crystal would last, the longer fusible material you'd have to work with, but the less power you were drawing from it. I know there were variable systems. I don't remember how those work.
Okay.
Um, this is literally like the basic model that I'm remembering.
Okay.
Um, and so basically, what happens with the quartz crystal is the positive end would go to one side of the crystal, the negative end would go to the other side of the crystal, and you'd have power, you'd have voltage, and you'd have amperage entering into the system from the battery. Um, what you were doing is you were bombarding it. There were multiple ways of causing the material in the crystal to fuse and create this, what basically beta radiation. Beta radiation
Mhm.
is what you drew power from. There was also ways of drawing power from X-rays and even gamma
Um,
ray. I don't know how the
for
gamma.
for our audience, what is beta radiation?
Beta radiation is electrons.
Okay.
When you destroy an atom, alpha radiation are the protons, beta radiation are the electrons, and then you've got waveforms happening. Basically, that task of destroying that atom created an influx, a momentary influx of dielectric current and magnetic current, basically field lines, to
Okay.
be drawn into the system, and then the immediate destruction of that circuit allowed those waves to propagate out into our normal space. And at higher frequencies, you have what's referred to as neutron radiation, what they consider to be neutrons. I don't believe in the existence of neutrons. It's a higher wave than a gamma ray, is what I believe it to be. Neutron radiation will pass through everything, including lead, as if it's not there. For some
Yeah.
reason, it won't pass through concrete.
It won't pass through concrete.
Yeah, you can shield from neutron radiation. It's the gamma radiation that lead is used to shield against. Um, I believe, let's see here. Neutron radiation is shielded by concrete. Gamma radiation is shielded by lead. X-ray radiation is shielded by aluminum. Beta particle radiation is pretty much shielded by, any conductor, and that's how you know it's an electron. And then alpha radiation, which is alpha particles, are shielded by anything. It can be shielded by a piece of paper. They don't pass through anything. Anyway, so what they used were neutron radiation emitters, and apparently adding this neutron radiation emitter into the quartz allowed the fusion to occur. And then suddenly you had beta radiation hit the plates that were used to capture the current, and you had power draw. This powered fighter craft, shuttlecraft, um, handheld devices. It was a one-time thing because the crystals were broken down and destroyed, so you could not recharge the system. It was a one-time use fusion battery. But that's how they did that. The larger ships, um, I'm still working that out, and I think the reason why I'm having trouble working out the specific power systems of the larger ships is because we didn't build those ourselves. Those
Okay.
were on loan to us because the
Do you know
Draco
who?
races, I think it was the Draco that loaned us the power stations for both our ships and our colonies. Um, you know, um, and I know that those devices acted on a way of drawing power directly from time. It drew
Okay.
power from time, and the way I understand that, it took me time to break down how do you draw power from time. Technically speaking, we're drawing power from time in our electric circuits. We're just doing it at an extremely inefficient, half-assed way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
When I was on Mars, they were operating using the angular momentum of the planet's rotation as their power source. And as they built more bases, more cities, they found that they were slowing the day. And so they had to develop a new system. They decided that that was not sustainable, and they got complaints from the other races on Mars.
yeah. Um, I don't have direct memories of that, but that sounds very logical to me of how the Germans were doing that. Sounds like they would be using some sort of Tesla system
Yeah,
style,
a,
system.
a lot of their early work was based on Tesla.
Even their plasma work, that the work that they used to finalize the Hanabu engines were based on stuff Tesla was actually doing at the time in secret with the
Yeah.
government.
Yeah. I
People
know
don't,
that a lot of his work was very highly classified by the American government, and yet I also know that the Germans I was a part of used his work and discarded Einstein's. So
that's what I'm trying to do in an effort personally is I'm trying to rebuild the science that I remember using in Nacht Waffen.
yeah,
Um,
my memory of it is that they discarded relativity entirely,
right,
that they had a mix of quantum mechanics and electric universe, that they considered both of them to be valid and had worked out details through the Draco about what was actually real.
right. Um, what
So
I
the
remember,
Draco didn't at that point give us technology, but they did help us clean up our science.
what I remember is not a direct name, quantum mechanics. I remember everything being based on asking the questions of how does this relate to our understanding of electricity?
Um, I did I did engineering physics in college,
Right.
so I'm comparing the memories.
I got you.
That's where I'm coming up with the terminology, because the Germans did not use English language terms. They did not use the terminology that's currently being used on Earth. They were using terminology based on what was used at the turn of the 1900s. And so translating it is basically impossible. So it's based on I took physics in the 1980s, early 1980s. So it's based on what I actually took in university. So
Everything I know,
Herr
so
Mayor also took physics in college in his country.
I did take some math in college. I was majored in multimedia, which I then learned by the end of that program that I enjoyed math and electrical engineering far better than trying to design video games. Um, I prefer playing video games than making them. Anyway, um,
I can't focus on them
oh really?
really. I was great at pinball. But when they turned to the video screens, I can't get my eyes to focus on the movement, and I would end up with a major migraine, which I think is mind control.
I never had a problem with staring at a screen for hours on end.
I never did in space, but I do here.
I don't have a problem here with it. I do have to step away because it's like my brain is running so many tasks in the background that to focus on one thing for too long bothers me.
It becomes
I get
painful.
antsy and I have to step away. I think it's part of my ADD. Um, I have to step away and I'll start pacing and just run through what's going on in my head, let it, do its thing. Um, and that could take hours sometimes. And then
Yeah,
calm down and then come back to my video game or whatever other task or chore I'm doing, you
yeah.
know.
Um, I have to, like when I do an interview, I have to turn everything else off. And then I can focus in on the person I'm interviewing or who is interviewing me.
Every sound crick in my camper will draw my attention. My cats, if they move, will draw my attention. Yeah, I get you.
Yeah, so I'm wanting to be a thoughtful, considerate host
The
and give
only
you full
time,
attention.
the only time that I'm able to drown everything out is if I'm either playing a video game or watching a show that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Any other time, everything's in the forefront. That's the only time I can really zone everything out that's going on in my head and around my environment and just focus on one thing
I can focus in on
for
one
a
thing
certain amount of time.
when I'm reading.
I can do that when I'm reading from time to time, depends on what I'm reading.
Yeah.
I have to be extremely interested in it. I've noticed that certain scientific subjects I'm more interested in than any fictional subject in when I'm reading.
Yeah. I have trouble reading fiction. It's like,
I'd rather watch that on a TV.
yeah,
Books are for learning, TV's for shutting down.
pretty much. Yeah. I try to read fiction and I can read the same 2 pages over and over and over again. But when I read something that's nonfiction,
Right.
then I can zone into it, and Lou has to tap me. It's time to make dinner.
I'll read something like right now I'm into some of Eric P. Dollard's work and I'll read that and I'll be like, oh crap, I'm gonna be late for work.
Yeah. Bosses.
I actually don't have a late for work given my job. I can be there at any point in time. There's no schedule, but it's like when I want to be there so I get done at the time I want to be done, I'm gonna be late.
Yeah, I understand that. It's nice to have an open schedule, though. A lot
Oh,
of folks
boss,
don't.
I deliver boxes for a living. My boss doesn't care when I get there as long as at the end of the day all the boxes are delivered.
Yeah, that can be helpful. Um, I used to I used to really appreciate. Well, I did home health care and housekeeping for 2 decades because I had kids who were medication dependent and would go into adrenal shock. And I had a husband who was injured at work and had to have doctor appointments. And doing housekeeping and home health care, I got paid well. I was getting 3 times minimum wage, and I had a flexible schedule. Yeah, the work was hard, but so is anything else that pays that well.
Right.
So, um, anyone who thinks that housekeepers are low end of the spectrum has never been one.
Oh, I know some housekeepers that own cars more expensive than what I've got.
Well, I didn't put a lot into appearances, but I had 3 kids who were medication dependent and 4 stepkids. So my money went into feeding children,
Right, right, as it should.
as it should. And so kids are worth it. You have to be careful how you word things today, because if you say I love kids, people take it the wrong way.
Just so everybody knows, this is Barks root beer.
Yeah, well,
Taste of beer.
this is pumpkin spice uncaffeinated tea
I
by
can't.
Yogi.
I don't like pumpkin.
So
The only
I've
alcohol
mentioned it before. I'm diabetic. I can't drink. I can't have soda. Yeah.
I do drink some alcohol, but it's literally like seasonal, like holidays. I drink
Um.
my brother mead. He makes homemade mead.
Oh. I used to drink occasionally. Um, I have no resistance to alcohol. I would literally get drunk on a,
Disgusting to me.
um,
Beer specifically.
I would get drunk on a single wine cooler. I mean, disgustingly, embarrassingly drunk. And so I would wait until I got that first initial warm rush, and then I would stop drinking.
My brother's homemade mead is so high in alcohol, I don't have time to get a buzz before I pass out.
It,
Half a bottle, I'm out.
uh, what did he call you?
Oh, he wasn't there when it happened.
Okay.
Half a
Good.
bottle, he was out cold, and he's the drunk.
Yeah, I know some of us.
His tolerance of the entire family.
Some of us in this community have no resistance to alcohol at all, like me, and others have so much resistance that it basically has no effect on them. And
I remember,
neither one is normal.
I remember having like 3 or 4 shots, like the large shots of some Taka. That's my mom's favorite vodka. Um, so I actually like the taste. I like sweet alcohols. I'm not an alcoholic. As my brother puts it, people who like sweet alcohols are not an alcoholic. I
Mm,
drink maybe once a year, but anyway, that when I had some, and as you can see, I should not have a tolerance with how little I drink, but I had like 3 or 4 shots, large shots of Taka, um, and it barely phased me.
mm. Well, I have had men tell me I'm a cheap date because I would get drunk on so little. That it was like, that was somewhat insulting. But yeah, we're off topic.
Yeah, we are, aren't we? Where were we?
We were talking about the battery, and I think you were going into the engines.
Yeah. Okay, so that getting into how crystals are used in Nacht Waffen technology, I started to remember um, the latest engine design.
Okay.
I remember now, for people who don't know, one of my alters was on an R&D program. I don't know which not I don't know which German colony. I don't even
Okay.
know if it was military or not. I just know that all I remember I actually remember this screen panel. Um, it was always the screen panel. It wasn't a square. It was like a podium that you stood at, but the whole thing was a screen that you could interact with.
Okay.
But it was flat, and then it came up so, and then it was like the sides were just like so, and then it went up like so, and then like so, but this side was wide. So like one, two, actually no, it was flat, then the sides, then this. So it was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sides, the bottom being the biggest. It had a slight curve to it, curved in like this, and it was like my station. This is
Okay.
where all my data was that I worked with and manipulated. I wasn't assigned directly to this station. I was assigned to the team. We were designing engines. That was our focus. We were designing new engines that were more energy efficient, but were faster, more
Okay.
maneuverable, um, capable of handling things. I think I also worked on shielding, which goes hand in hand with field generators. They're
Hmm.
almost one and the same.
Yeah.
You just alter the emitter slightly, and it will repel things like an atom does to other atoms. Because basically, what we're doing is we're applying that saying from Victor Schauberger, observe and copy nature. What a field generator is a macro scale atom.
Yeah. That makes sense.
An atom on the macro scale. And this goes into um, how the Germans view gravity and atomic structures. There is no neutron in what I remember dealing with German science. There was no idea for a neutron. There were these protons in the center, and there were these. They weren't shells. They were micro scale force tubes, just like how people like Oliver Heaviside, Michael Faraday, Nikolai Tesla, they didn't have a concept for an electron. The electron was not what they dealt with. They were physically observing tubes of force.
Hmm.
Um, Tesla
That's
even
true.
came out and said that he would just before he, I think 3 months before he died, he said, "I'm working on a dynamic theory of gravity based on tubules that I am observing, that I've been observing through my entire research." And that we're talking all the way from the late 1800s when he started all this. This is where power comes from, is these tubules. And there's two different kinds. And as they interact, they actually create two more different kinds based on their combinations to four different kinds of current. It's not four different completely types of current, it's four variations of electricity. One is dielectricity, which is a dielectric force tube, which in all the math is measured in per centimeters. So
Okay.
basically it's how many force tubes are you fitting within a specific volume, denser and denser volume. Then you have the magnetic force tubes, which are measured in number of centimeters squared.
Okay.
So it's how much space are you using? It so dielectricity is how dense are you compacting the force tubes. Magnetism is how much space are you using stretching these tubes out, is what the math uses. And how they, I forget which one is which. You've got diamagnetism, diamagnetic um, force tubes, and then you've got um, magnetodielectric force tubes. And one is, now you got to understand, dielectric force tubes can only terminate from one atom to another atom. They terminate between atoms. They do not terminate back on themselves.
Okay. So they're not
So
circular.
if you have a surface of dielectricity, it's terminating somewhere else onto another surface.
Okay.
Um, Magnetic force lines, all magnetic force lines terminate back on themselves. The tube itself terminates back on itself, not onto other parts of the surface, but literally back on itself. Um, and these other two forms of current is literally how you manipulate a circuit to cause the magnetic force lines to terminate on another surface like a dielectricity would. And the other one is how you take dielectricity and cause it to terminate back in on the force line to terminate back in on itself like magnetism would. That's how you create the 4 different forms of current. Electromagnetism is not an actual thing. It's I think it's part of a magnetic um, the magnetomotive force is caused to separate itself, and the force lines are literally just spreading out into space. It's literally dislocated itself from the matter that created it, or I should say that caused it to form. Um, if I'm remembering right, I got all these images going on in my head, and it's hard to keep track of things. Names are very hard for me. I see
Yeah.
images in my head, and asking me to describe something, I might get the name wrong or the verbal description wrong, but what's in my head is what's going on in my head. I think visually, and I only think visually. Um, Anytime I'm talking and trying to describe something, I have to convert it to words, which is not something I do in my head. I don't talk to myself, I visualize to myself. Anyway,
I used to talk to myself in my head, and after after the stroke that I had in labor with my youngest, I lost most of that ability. And I think in pictures now and have to translate it into words to talk. And there are times that because of the stroke, I am unable to do that. And I tend to use small words to describe big concepts because I can't access the big words.
right.
And then when I'm talking about the Germans in space, it's translating from another language into little words in English.
See, my situation, I don't even remember the words. I don't remember. One time, only one time, do I remember an actual word. And it was when I was in an altar in a fighter craft. I was a pilot in a fighter craft, and I actually met my CO here in real life on that um, program. And anyway, we're leaving the. I don't know if it was. I don't think it was Mars. It could have been Mars. It could have been Mars. All I know is it felt like the North American desert. Um, but the sky was a little off. Um, uh, I was looking out from basically an underground facility where everything looked like the ceiling looked like something out of Russian um, structures. You know how you've got those curved ceilings on the 4 pillars?
Mm-hmm.
The whole ceiling was that. And that was the entire hangar. And I suspect that was because that's a stronger structure
It
when you're
is.
moving into a into a mountain.
It's a much stronger structure.
The the doors were just a half circle. The openings were all half circle. Um, and I remember just standing out there and I'm looking up at the sky. Just outside the doors, there's some rocks off to the way. There's just enough room for us to get out in our fighters and turn left, like literally a 90-degree left right out the doors and taxi.
mm-hmm.
That's all I remember of the ground. I do have other memories with my CO, but outside of that, I remember being in the air I remember being in formation. We're heading towards the outer edge of the atmosphere. I still see atmosphere. And I remember saying into the radio, Fluga, which I found out later on with a friend of mine who lives in um, South Africa who knows German, says, "Oh, that's what they use for the word pilot." Oh, okay. And then I looked it
Yeah.
up, and it's literally the German word for to fly.
Glücken.
And
Yeah,
use
I'm
that for the
remembering more
use
and
that.
more German by the day. The problem I have is that we speak a dialect on Mars called Schwabisch, Swabian in English, and it's a form of High German, but it's considered hillbilly. And so finding actual documentation of it is, especially on the internet, is really difficult because nobody wants to admit to speaking it. And yet that's what we the Germans on Mars spoke. And no, I am not German, but I grew up with those people, and that feels more like home than here does. And a lot of people have sent me confused questions, and I'm going to be blunt about it. I was 9 years old when I was taken to Mars, and this was my first time growing up. And they put me in shula with their own children, and I was treated well. And I was honored because I was one of their women pilots who were fighting the war and helping win it. And I may have been considered too dangerous to be among civilians on the regular, but they treated me really, really well. And I had everything I needed, including medical care. And when I came home and was a child again in America, my parents were poor. We were we lived on a dairy. I went to labor camp schools. And as an adult, looking back on what I was taught in Shula, it was 90% objectively correct with only 10% propaganda. And what I was taught in the American school system was 40% objectively correct with 60% propaganda.
It's worse these days.
I've I'm not doubting that. I saw what was going on when my kids were in school, and around the turn of this last century, and I was mortified because they've taken out anything that teaches critical thinking or logic. So it's completely watered down now. And I went to visit my old high school and found out that this school, which when I was there in the 70s, they taught Spanish, German, French, and you had the option of being transported to the other high school for Latin, actual Latin. Now they only offer Spanish. Well, what are you supposed to do if you're in a field where you're going to need one of those other languages? You're
Right.
just fucked. Um, Hold a minute. So
Where were we?
we were we were talking about the different kinds of currents that, or
Uh,
electrical magnetic things that you remembered from the Germans on Mars. And I think we were heading back into the
Drive shaft.
territory of the engines.
Yeah. One thing I'm remembering is a lot of the drive systems that are designed out there and here and even by ETs. Not all of them, but a lot of them involve bismuth.
Mhm.
Um,
Bismuth or mercury.
when you use mercury, you're creating a vortex system.
Mhm.
It creates a massive, it's a fusion device. You're fusing the way the vortex, the plasma vortex of mercury occurs, the way they're pulsing it, the frequency of pulses they're producing initiates fusion of mercury into gold.
Yeah, I knew that. And they add
Now,
a substance that,
they add other elements to it to hold that off. It
yeah,
doesn't stop it. What it does is it slows it down enough so that it's viable, it's
yeah,
usable.
yeah.
It still goes bad, turns into gold, and then you fall out of the sky
Well,
at a
yeah.
certain point. Now, of course,
It
there's
also gives off a lot of radiation,
the
and the,
version that has the additions to it does.
yeah,
And what it gives off is a lot of gamma and neutron radiation. Lots
yeah,
of gamma, lots of
because that's how the Germans ended up with the regen tanks, is because the crews of the original Hanabu were dying of, painfully of radiation sickness.
they
And the
had
men,
no lead in the system. They had no shielding for neutron radiation at all. It,
they, the Mounted Empire took pity on them and gave them the regen tanks. Um, so this, they were, the Mantids had the idea, if the Germans were that motivated to leave their homeworld, that they were willing to risk that kind of a death to do it, that they deserved some help. So yeah, the Hanabu with the original Digloka engines were dangerous, dangerous things.
it's
And
because of that. You can use other elements than mercury. Just that mercury creates the strongest effect.
yeah,
It it creates the strongest um, motive force against the dielectric field that gravity interacts with.
well, part of the problem why they didn't have shielding on the Hanabu was that they were working in the same time frame that Marie Curie and
You
her
had no
husband
idea
Pierre
about radiation.
were actually discovering radiation, and they had no clue that this was what was making them sick. So they didn't understand anything about it. And the ones that were in space, the Mantids again told them what their issue was. Now, a lot of people think that the Germans only interacted with the Draco. This isn't true. They, the Will ladies from German history were interacting with the Aldebaran and the Draco. And once we got into space, the Mantids took an interest in us. And the trouble was the Germans had already made deals with the Draco. So, and then they found out just how horrible those deals were.
Right. I
And
feel that they would have gotten a better deal if they had worked something out with the Mantids versus the Draco.
yeah, they would have gotten a better deal.
Every Mantid I've ever met um, was a very kind-hearted soul.
Hmm. Unless you're up against them in war.
Oh yeah, of course
And
they'll defend themselves. just like anybody else.
Yeah.
But
They'll, or if they want where you live, they can be quite fierce. And I've heard from more than one of them that they believe that humanity is doing a poor job of maintaining Earth.
they do believe that. They believe humanity should be pushed aside, but they haven't done anything about it. Because
They haven't because
what Mars is are two different things.
the government of the galaxy has chosen to treat us as a protected race, and they have gotten angry about how everyone from Earth is behaving out in space. And my understanding is that all of the factions are going to be pushed back to the solar system, and then a seal will be put around us where we can't get out and nobody can get in. And at that point, we will be given the opportunity to become their foster children, I guess is probably the correct term, to be taught how to become a galactic civilization and good citizens. And in the meantime, we would be,
In a playpen.
well, we were in a playpen before and we got out. So we would be in a bigger playpen. And we would be expected to learn to get along with the other races in the solar system. And one of those is the Jahami. There are probably 8 other sentient developed races in the solar system besides us.
As far as mantid interaction, the most I have is with the Mars mantids.
Um, I've had interactions with some of the others.
I've only had one interaction with the one of the Mantid Empire.
mhm.
And that memory was I wasn't actually interacting with that one. I was on a medical slab with 4 grays around me in my boxers. I think I was in the Nacht Waffen. I knew that when I had the memory, I was taller than I was, more muscular, less fatty, and I didn't own any boxers that looked like that.
So they dressed you. Okay.
Uh,
My interaction with my most recent interaction with a mounted was when I decreed that I was retiring from the CIA. And it was a unilateral decree, and they chose to send a mantid to debrief me. And that was a very interesting interaction, and I basically told them that I was retired, I wasn't doing any more work for them, that I was tired of killing, and that I was not going to cooperate any further. And she said, so what are you going to do if the agency refuses this? I said, depends on what they do to me.
I'm going to defend myself, of course.
In the meantime, since then, I've been shot 10 times with energy weapons, and I have had my shoulder broken. So it has not been a real fun experience. So yeah, she was actually quite polite and asked some rather intrusive questions and made it clear that that she was seeing me on several levels and not just the physical. And I was surprised that a human agency would send a mantid to represent them.
Oh, when I first started remembering, a couple of days before I first contacted you, a few years,
Okay. That's been a while.
yeah, it was quite a while back. Um, like maybe what, 4 years ago,
Yeah, pretty close to that.
somewhere around there. I actually remember it was May 30th. I don't know why I remember that date so well. No, it was May 29th because the day I woke up from all of this was the day before my dad's birthday.
Okay.
Nope, it was the day after my dad's birthday. My dad's on the 29th.
Yeah, the longer it goes, the more fuzzy the dates become.
Yeah, I'm off by a day. Okay, I think I'm rocking it. Um, so I actually remembered standing on the bridge of a ship wearing a black uniform, wearing a Nacht Waffen uniform. I didn't know any of that at the time. Didn't
Yeah,
know
I
what
remember
I was looking at the time.
when you first talked to me, it was, well, this color uniform.
Yeah, it was like this is what the uniform. Like I was trying to describe everything that I could. Like yeah, that's Nacht Waffen. Okay, moving on. Anyway, I was describing this pendant. You know, it was on this side. Um, on my breast. It was, and I was typing it into Google trying to find it. It's like that's when they found out. Oh, he's looking for this.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that night, I remember going to bed. I stayed up late. I went to bed around 12:30 in the morning. I woke up about 1:45 to the dogs. Two dogs. No, it was three dogs at the time. Maggie hadn't died yet. Um, all three dogs barking up a storm. They were going crazy. I woke up to my dad. I was living in his house at the time. Threw his bedroom door open, stormed down the hallway into the living room. Um, and then you hear silence for a moment, and then he opened the cages, let them out back. And while this is all going on, I'm, suddenly starting to remember what just happened.
Mm.
Um, I suddenly started remembering getting up out of bed after I fell asleep. I remember standing up out of bed, walking out of my bedroom, down the hall, into the kitchen, to the back door. I remember opening the back door and stepping outside. Then suddenly walking into the kitchen from outside, closing the back door, walking to my bedroom, laying back down, and then suddenly waking up to the dogs barking and my dad storming out of his bedroom. Um, and then maybe 20 minutes went by. And then suddenly I started remembering what happened in between there. I remember sitting, I couldn't see any walls, I couldn't see anything. I was sitting in a chair. I knew I was sitting. There were people, human people, just all around me, like a half circle. If there were any behind me, I couldn't see. It was just, and they were at a little bit of a distance, um, maybe 10 to 15 feet away, just a line. Some of them were wearing suits, like normal suits. Others were wearing military uniforms. Um, and there was a mantid right there in my face. I had no idea what it was doing. I figure it was scanning my brain. How much do you remember? you know, kind of thing is what I assumed.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that was the first time I remembered a man. No, it was the second time I remembered a mantid. Um,
You
so
can't hide anything from a mantid that's scanning you. You
no,
you shouldn't even you should
their
not even try.
abilities are on par with the Draco.
Yes, their abilities are on a par with the Draco, but they are much more gentle about it.
They are. If they don't want you to know they're in your head, you'll never have a clue. Yeah, as far as you're concerned, they're just standing there looking like a statue, but they're all up in your business.
Yeah, all your business. Several
One
levels of
time,
it.
Nacht Waffen asked a question by one. There was repairs being done on the ship. We were in a corridor. I remember there were no lights. We were in a corridor. The only light I saw was from plasma torches, welding going on
Hmm.
along the my left side. That people were kneeling down, and I'm walking past them, watching this happen. And I get to the end of the corridor, like literally just past the welding going on, and there's a mantid comes out of the shadow, and all I see is his face. I don't even know if it's him or her. I hear a voice in my head. I hear an audible voice as if I'm hearing it with my ears,
Hmm.
but it's in my head. I know what it said, but I don't remember audio. I
Yeah.
suspect it was in German, but I think my subconscious is translating. I know that in that moment I'm hearing audio,
Hmm.
but I have no memory of the audio. I just know that it was asking me, how are the repairs coming? And I didn't even have time to consciously answer, not even to think of the answer. It before I had time to formulate an answer in my mind, it said, very good, go about your business.
Yeah,
At least something to that effect.
that's yeah, that's how they operate.
They're very
Um,
efficient.
on Mars, um, I would occasionally be sent to capture one, and I was not very good at it. I would inevitably be led into a cave of some sort where I would be dinner for a spider, and I would wake up in a regen tank. So yeah,
Presume that when I first interacted with the mantids on Mars, the piece had already happened, the
okay,
treaty, because I had crashed my ship. I was in a storm. I was caught in a storm,
okay.
and my ship had crashed. And this thing, I see that out of an opening of my cockpit, this mantid head just kind of show up in my view, and he pulls me out
Hmm.
and helped me limp to a cave where we waited out the storm together.
That's cool.
And then he helped me on my way. I know that he helped me to the nearest human settlement base, but I have no memory of the in between there.
Okay. Um, I left Mars at the end of the war, so I have no experience of the peacetime.
I do remember being eaten by spiders. Like that's a horrible memory.
Yeah, the venom is very intense. It burns like fire, but you die fast. It's not like Earth
I
spiders where
was
they keep you
alive.
alive.
I was alive. I wasn't venomized. I had one of my legs, um, both of my legs were in um, e- either one's mouth. I had one on each leg, literally chewing them, and another one
Ew,
on my left arm. I'm screaming.
I bet.
What had happened was I was with this unit, and I was either a pilot or having something to do with the shuttle. Um, I was simply out there with them, but we were out by this outcropping of rocks, and I don't know what was going on with them. I can't remember. I just remember one of them was looking at at something, um, like a diagram or something. Um, and I saw between these two outcroppings of rocks, this one spider just kind of, I saw the arms. He was
Hmm.
going for the guy that was closest to that outcropping, and like completely snuck up on everybody.
Yeah,
Only I
there's
saw only I saw it. And I yelled spider and pushed him out the way, and it got me and drug me off. I'm screaming. I remember screaming as being dragged into a hole. And then
yeah,
suddenly I remember three spiders on me, one on either leg, and I'm still alive. I feel everything. When I first had this memory come up, I could feel
hmm yeah.
something popping
These
into my legs.
these
I
memories are
was
very
driving at the time and had to pull over.
the memories are very sensory. You get
Um,
all the feels, all the smells, all the tastes. You can feel the wind on your skin if it was open to air, and
when
all the telepathy that was involved is also very
very
intense.
vivid, I remember suddenly these flashes of lights, these little to me they looked like fireflies, just making holes into the spiders and
Mm,
impacting the walls of the cave. It's just like full auto. These little balls of light. I assume they were plasma pulse weapons.
yeah,
But then
sound like it.
when the spiders stopped moving, I remember being grabbed from the back and drug out, like as if there was a handle right there for them to grab onto me. Um, and I remember being drug out of the cave, and I looked up, and it was the guy I pushed out of the way. He went
Good.
into the cave after me.
Um, during the war, um, when we were in battle, because we had regen tanks that could bring you back from the dead, um, we were required to use laser swords to decapitate our teammates that were too wounded to walk on their own and bring their heads back and regenerate.
I don't know what happened to me outside of the cave. I only remember being drugged to the opening just to where I could see the guy that was dragging me out. After that, I have no memory.
So you don't remember waking up in a regen tank?
I don't remember anything after that. I don't have enough memory of Mars. I have
Okay.
memory of that mantid, the memory of being eaten by the spider.
Well, the
And,
traumatic stuff is what you remember first.
hmm,
The the stuff that's emotional, the traumatic stuff is at the top of the pile. And you get through
they're
that
the
stuff.
strongest memories. They
Yeah,
have
those are
the densest number of neural connections.
yeah, the more emotional you are about it, the better you'll remember it later. And those are the things that overcome the mind wipes. I have bizarre memories because they went through and deleted people's faces.
Oh,
So,
I have the missing faces too. I have one incident, one memory. I was on a bridge of a ship. It was a teardrop, one of those teardrop ships.
mhm.
when I was with Nacht Waffen, I did a lot of service on a teardrop shaped ship. I was a pilot for one, navigator. Um, I remember being on the bridge, and I remember see, our bridge. What I remember is different from what some others remember. I remember the chair. I don't remember being cybernetically linked to the ship. I remember having to sit in a chair in
Okay.
order to link to the ship.
I remember being linked to it with a chip,
I
but
remember having to sit in a chair, and then I would lean back and close my eyes, and then suddenly I could see outside the ship,
okay.
and I
Where
could
I could do that just with the chip. That
right. You
was
could do that 24/7 at all times. I don't remember that. I might have had that with the fighter ship, the fighter craft,
yeah.
on with that. I don't remember that now. Given I don't have as much memory with those service times as you do. Um,
Well, I wouldn't have had any memory, just the weird stuff, if the NSA group had not decided to activate it. So when they come through and they use your remember code, you don't have any options.
like for instance, I don't remember the region tanks at all.
Okay.
I do remember a stasis tank with the yellow goo,
Okay.
and I remember a tank with all with solid black goo. Like it's a whole tank I was dunked in, but it wasn't for any embedding into me. It was to do it like a medical type of task. It was just that tank was black. Everybody I've talked to say that the region tanks are either the goo is either green or blue.
Yeah.
Um, the stasis tanks are either yellow or orange.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that particular time, and I actually remember the feeling of going into the goo in the black tank. Um, I was told by a friend said that that was a certain program in Nacht Waffen, kind of like an SS type of thing, where that particular group, um, you go through this ritual where you're
Mm-hmm.
completely dunked in this stuff, and it's programmed to physically enhance you so you can withstand heavy gravity worlds and things of the like. And
Okay. I was in the space version of SS
right.
and we drank it. We were not dipped in
I
it.
don't know if I drank it or not. I don't have a memory of that because I remember other things around it. It's possible.
Okay.
And because I have memories of literally being emotionally dead, certain memories are I'm just emotionally dead.
Yeah. That
That
goes with
possible.
that goes with having drank the black goo.
But this tank, I was um, I was slowly dropped into it, and I remember as I was to touch the goop, it felt so weird. It was like it was a warm feeling. It felt like buzzing bees, and it had a pressure to it. You could feel it going into you, like like as if your skin just wasn't there. It just osmosis into you, and you could feel the buzzing bees going into you. You know that feeling until the pressure of outside to inside to where you couldn't feel
Mm-hmm.
whether it was on your skin or not. The pressure was equalized between outside and inside, and then suddenly the buzzingness stopped, and it was like complete 100% sensory deprivation.
Yeah, waking up in the regen tank was sensory deprivation, and you didn't know what color it was until they pulled you out and hosed you off.
Know if it was, you don't even know what orientation you're at, or if your arms are moving.
No, I would wake up in the region tank, and because it's dark inside, I would wonder, well, did they let me stay dead this time?
Well, then all of a sudden, I don't know how much time went by. I just remember all of a sudden the reverse effect. I started to feel the buzzing sensation starting to move from inside to outside, and I started to feel the pressure on the outside of my body increase um, as I'm being slowly lifted out. Then I was dropped onto the floor. I was lowered onto the floor, and I dropped to my knees, hands and knees, and started puking this stuff up.
Yeah,
And I could see the tank was black, and I could see the stuff I was puking up was black.
yeah.
And there were men standing around. I was completely naked. There were other men standing around in black Nacht Waffen uniforms, and that's all I remembered of that. A friend psychically looked at that and tells me that they were enhancing your muscle skeletal strength to be able to handle heavier gravity worlds.
Well, that would make sense. Um, the black goo, the black goo is an AI that's based on a miniaturized nanobot tech, and it was originally developed to create a healthier, enhanced population on its original world, and they did not program in safeties. And it reached a point where it became the master and started treating organic life forms as competition.
That's what I've heard.
And there are several races out there who think they're smart enough to control it. And it is the most dangerous thing out there. And the galactic government is taking steps to get rid of it. So that's one of the biggest problems that the galactic government is having with the Germans, and the use of black goo in their military and the use of cyborgs in their population. Those are the two things that they're having the most trouble dealing with. And the other human factions are using outright slavery as well as cyborgs. And
Yeah,
so
when
all
you
of us,
hear Germans in space talk about how horrible Kruger and the other ones are being, that's really saying something with
yeah,
how bad the Germans can be.
well, how bad humans can be.
This is true.
You know, it's not, that's
We've
one of the
heard this
things,
stuff from the
that's
Japanese.
one of the things that I'm dealing with my disclosure is that we have all of this, frankly, American propaganda that the Germans are worse than other people.
I think the Americans are worse.
What we have in space is the one whistleblower calls them ICC, another calls them planetary corporations, another calls them the Alliance. They're all the same people, and they are all the military industrial complex, and the Germans call them bankers in space. And these people are the ones who have the cyborg factories. They are the ones who are kidnapping humans from Earth and turning them into cyborgs and selling them to ETs. And yet their assets, who are supposedly whistleblowing, are blaming the Germans for this. And I have a lot of.
Not the problem.
You need to talk louder.
The Germans are not worse or than anybody else. They are bad as humans can be, any humans. But from my personal experience, what's being called the ICC is far, far worse.
From what I remember,
the ICC comes out of the American private sector.
Yeah, they are far worse than anything else out there, and all of them are bad.
Even the Solar Warden is just as bad. They're literally promoting the slave trade. They're trafficking humans.
They are trafficking humans, and they are also stopping ETs and vivisecting them while interrogating them. And they
kidnap ETs just to dissect and learn them and study them.
Yeah, these are sentient beings with permission from the Galactic Authority and from at least Nacht Waffen, and their embassies are coming back and complaining to the Germans, well, we went to Mars and your people did this, and we are having to explain, well, there are factions and some of them are not civilized. So
because humans are being seen as one people, not many factions. Yeah. Basically, we're seen as descendants of the Shahami, and the Shahami are not seen in a very good light.
Exactly. But yet you talk about them on Earth, and their blue collar group is the tall whites, and they're called Nordics. And the New Age community thinks they're going to save humanity from the folks that are controlling, and they have no clue
they're controlling the folks that are controlling us.
Exactly. And
they're the originators of the leash.
They are the ones who made us as a slave race in the first place. And I'm looking at this and going, you know, you reach a point where people are too ignorant and religious to even talk to them. And I hate to put it in those terms, but it's the truth. If you think anybody out there that looks human is going to save your ass, I'm sorry, you're barking up the wrong tree.
Exactly. I actually remember now, Draco Empire is no better, but I remember being treated better by them than anybody else. As far as humans go, I remember being treated better by the Germans than any other human.
Yeah.
But as far as species goes that I interacted with on a long-term basis, I was treated better by the Draconians, by the Draco Empire, than anybody else.
Yeah. I've never had any issues with the Draconians at all.
And I'm aware that because of the Draconian DNA that the CIA put in a lot of us, me included, the Draconians see us more as a part of them than a part of the Jahami.
Yeah. Those of us that the CIA shot up with Draco to affect our DNA and to give us abilities that they wanted for us to have, the Draco treat us much better than they do normals. But then the normals are unable to be around them for longer than a half an hour. And the Draco have some serious issues with the Shahami, and so does everybody else in the area. The Shahami are aggressive.
They nuked their own planet.
They nuked our planet.
They nuked multiple planets in our system.
Uh-huh.
They're the ones that actually destroyed what is now the asteroid belt that Mars and Ceres were moons of.
Yeah. They have gone through and in wars of succession. So these are not even wars that needed to be fought. These were people in the royal family fighting over who was going to be boss. Now, does this sound familiar at all?
Yeah.
But they went through total wars, destroyed the entire solar system more than once over these wars over who was going to be boss. Well, they have now reaped the benefit of their actions because 80% of their male population is sterile.
As far as from what I'm aware, they no longer have a home world.
I don't know about their home world. I know they still have a planet in the solar system that they're claiming as a home world because I've been on it. That place has been nuked so many times it glows in the dark. And there are folks from a mining colony of theirs that were attacked by the Draco, and they have an underground city on Mars, and they're wanting to come to Earth. And they made information deals with the American government, and that's where a lot of the solar warden tech has come from, is from blue-collar Shahami that want to leave Mars. And the American government fell for it hook, line, and sinker. And I'm like, you guys have no common sense. When you're dealing with strangers, you find out who the hell they are first. You find out what they really want first. Then you talk business. Right. But from a position of knowledge, not from a position of begging. Oh, yes, please give us some of your technology so that we can beat these evil Germans in space who went into space to get away from you. I mean, they're out in space. Leave them the fuck alone.
Right.
I mean, it would seem to make sense to me, but no, they want to take World War II back into space.
Sounds a lot like a descendant of the Shahami to me.
Exactly. They're acting just like Shahami. And, it's like, and yet they tell me, oh, yes, we are so advanced, we are going to ascend. And I'm like, all righty. That tells me exactly where their mindset is. It's completely on religion. And then others tell me,
I've since freed myself from all that.
Then there are others who tell me, well, Jesus is coming back and he's going to take us all to heaven with us. And who is the God of Christianity? A Shahami.
Yep.
And where is your heaven going to be? Another place where you're enslaved to a Shahami, because that's how they see your ass. They don't see you as an equal or a child of theirs. You are a slave. So
it took me some time to come to those conclusions on my own. But I eventually did.
I'm glad. I've been talking about it for a couple of years now, and I have.
Well, it was before you were talking about it. Is when I was already asking those questions and figuring all that out.
Well, because of the way that the NSA agent interacted with me, I was left in a love bite relationship. Okay. And I was picked up by the twin flame community at the same time that all of my religious programming had fallen away. And so I was looking at them as, okay, this is an explanation that makes sense. Only in the long run it didn't. And then because I had past life memories that were consistent with being a Shahami, the Anuna community grabbed me, and they are the folks who believe they are reincarnations of Anunnaki, some of whom are not actually dead in the first place, so I don't know how they can be reincarnations. And the explanation I've found is that some of us, because all humans are Shahami descendants, that some of us have cell memory, and that's where these memories are coming from. And when I came to this understanding, I left their community. And
Most people don't realize that there is such a thing as DNA memory.
yeah, there is. And so a lot of the stuff that's out there as religious communities or special interest groups, what they are is they're latched onto a concept and made their whole lives about it. And a lot of these have developed mythologies, and the end result is a very toxic, mind-controlled group. And none of them are accomplishing anything positive that I've seen. Now,
I
there
used,
are individuals amongst them that are.
I used to be a Christian. I had considered myself a non-denominational Christian, but all that is another denomination. And it's just another religion. It
It's just another mind control apparatus.
it was after I started remembering, um, is when I started asking all kinds of questions, and memories of explanations that I had been asking all my life started coming up. What I was being taught out there in space, what I
Yeah,
was observing firsthand out there in space. You can't unsee that. You can't,
exactly.
once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you know it, you can't unknow it. And that started conflicting with my religious beliefs.
Well,
And I had to pick.
in the summer of 2018, I was abducted by the Shahami, by the royal court at the time. And the then King Nanar um, decreed that I was personally an abomination, and I was ordered to be permanently dead. And they had me inside a machine. It's known as the truth machine. And it actually looks really similar to a regen tank without the gel. And they were stripping off my altars, recording the memories, and then destroying the altars. The intention was to completely destroy me as a soul, so there would be nothing left to reincarnate. And the Germans,
That a race has a technology like that is horrible.
um,
To destroy a soul.
the Germans in space rescued me and lost the ship in the process.
I remember you telling me about that.
And I have been spending the time ever since. This was a major turning point in my evaluations of my memories, because up to that point, I had still thought of Shahami as actually decent people. And part of me still bought into the American propaganda that the Germans were monsters. And after that, I had to really stop and think about where did my biases come from? Were they valid? Was this something that was real, or was this my human upbringing propaganda changing things? And I've tried to just look at the memories objectively, or as close to it as I could, based on the understanding that, well, according to the gods of Earth, I was a monster. And these supposed monsters came and lost people rescuing me. So I've looked at things a lot differently since then, and I've caught a lot of hell from people because the Germans are just people. They have a culture that is based on militarism, but it has been for the last 5,000 years. There's nothing new about that. They no longer mistreat people of other races. They learned in space that all humans have more in common with each other than we do with any ET. And they have learned that no matter what they do out there, they are never masters of their destiny because there's always an ET that they have to deal with. An ET who is stronger, smarter, bigger, and has better tech. So that was a great humbling force for them. That being said, they are honoring their contract with the Draco and are doing military service for them and have done such a good job that, to my understanding, the Draco have stopped eating people. They've decided that we are worth more as military allies than we are as food products. And that's a major step for them. Now, it could be that they're just telling me that too.
Most of the members of the empire that I interacted with were vegetarians to begin with.
Okay.
Not now, as far as the head draconian race, they do eat meat.
Mm-hmm.
They're not 100% carnivorous, to my knowledge. Um, I have heard of some of them eating humans. Like, it's more of a um, what's the word? The word escapes me. Preference. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a they all eat humans. It's a personal preference thing. It's a horrible thing on our end. Um, of course. I don't know if they all stopped or not. That I'm
Okay.
not aware of. I do know that I was told that not all Draco eat sentient beings. Those that eat meat, not all of them eat sentient beings. Some of them are appalled by that very idea.
Mm-hmm.
Others don't really have a problem with it. And it's literally I've always seen the diversity of good, evil. Now, good, evil being relative, of course, but I've always seen my perspective of good and evil to be just as diverse in every race and species I have memory of as there is here on Earth with humans.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well. That that all of us who are in physical bodies have the same range of
Right.
good and evil in our
It's
racial groups.
a personal choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, culture and upbringing can have a factor, but it does ultimately come down to personal choice. And just because you're culturally upbrought doesn't mean that you can use culture as an excuse. No matter what race you're dealing with, they will tell you that same thing.
Yeah.
It's anything. Now every race has their own personal idea of what is okay and what is not okay, as far as behavior goes with interacting with other beings. So that's relative. Pretty much only a small handful of people within a small handful of species are okay with eating sentient beings.
Yeah.
The number of people out there that are appalled by the very notion of it outweigh the number of people that are okay with it.
I would agree with that. We are getting to the point where you need to tell our audience how to find you.
Uh, well, you can find me on Facebook, of course. Um, just under Matt Tracey. Um,
You do have a blog on Facebook, I thought.
yes, I do. I It's been so long since I've even been on it. Let's see here. I'm so lazy about it. I haven't updated it in years. Dude, trying to remember. Ah, my SSP and MILABs Journal is what it's called. You can also contact me there. Um, I haven't really set up a email dedicated for people contacting me with questions and stuff, and I don't really want to give out my personal email that I use for my day to day life.
Well, that's
Um,
understandable.
yeah, you can contact me on Facebook, whether through my blog or my Facebook page, my main page. Um, and I'm realizing we didn't actually get into the engine itself that this whole video was meant for. We got bunny trailed so much. But
Well,
that
that's
happens.
what happens when you have people with alters trying to talk about things.
I know I bunny trail so much, my family gets annoyed by it and they have to rein me in.
Well, that just means that you'll have to come back.
Right, right. We'll have to do another one here soon and finish this explanation. How much time do we actually have? A couple minutes?
I think we have about 3 minutes left.
I could probably throw in a little bit of the engine in there. Um, let's see here. Where was I? Okay, the explanation of the engine. We were at the bismuth. So they actually took a giant silicone crystal of quartz that they grew. The way they shaped it was two cones. So basically, you've got an end here and an end here, and then you've got your outer perimeter here, and it's just two cones. And that's what it looks like a spinning top type thing. Each cone is equal sized, and they doped it with bismuth. And I know this because when they charge it and light comes off of it, it comes off with a um, violet glow. There's violet light that comes off of it, and I know that in laser science, you create violet light lasers by doping a quartz crystal with bismuth,
Okay.
and that's how you create violet light in lasers. They did that, and we know that bismuth is used in. I haven't gone into the explanation really of how bismuth works to that effect, but they infused the crystal with bismuth. It literally floats there. in a kind of magnetic field. It's suspended, and when it's shot with dielectric pulses, it acts as a gear against the magnetic field, causes it to spin.
Okay.
So you've got a spinning crystal that's being pulsed with dielectric voltage. And what's that? It's the vocabulary is starting to escape me. It's it causes the bismuth atoms to actually spin. And when a bismuth atom is charged and spins, the actual atom is asymmetrical. It's not a sphere. It looks almost like an egg. And its charges, it's literally its shell, its negative shell creates a cone in one direction at one pole, so to speak. It's an asymmetrical charge, so you have more positive charge to one side, more negative charge to the other side, and the atom itself is spinning. So when you have a whole massive, like billions, trillions of these atoms doing this, in exactly the same direction. It's literally the same thing that you're trying to create with a superconductive plasma material. It's basically all acting in unison, all in the same direction. And so you have this massive influx of energy. Well, we know that gravity is affected by um, basically capacitors, asymmetrical capacitors. Everything, you can literally break it down to asymmetrical capacitor function. And that's what these bismuth atoms are doing. All atoms are capacitors. You've got your negative end of the terminal and your positive end of the terminal. And that's literally what gravity is. And all we're doing is making it on a macro scale, is like what Byfield Brown was doing with his asymmetrical capacitors.
Mm.
He's just taking that onto the macro scale. And that's what's happening internally on an atomic scale, billions of trillions of times over inside this crystal. And at the outer edge is where this field is literally just being pushed out evenly in every direction, is creating a larger field. Basically, you're creating a macro-sized atom that's capable of shielding you from other gravitational forces. It creates the effect of reducing mass and weight. You still feel mass and weight inside the field, but the effect of the outside masses and gravities are the effect through that field is reduced. And when it reaches absolute zero, you blip out of this universe and into hyperspace.
All right. Well, thank you for coming for this episode.
All right.